It is working. Perfect. All right. Sorry about that delay, folks. I was charging my mouse when I was away for a little bit, and all of a sudden I couldn't click on things, and that was very confusing / concerning. So if you heard like random noise in the background just now, that was me trying to figure shit out. So, oh, and now the camera is not working. Give me 1 second. It doesn't like when things are up close to it. All right, deactivate, reactivate. Haha, haha. You can see my hands, and you can see Lore, the bestest boy. All right, so, welcome to Sunday, streaming with Shaney, doing some D&D minis. Currently, I am making my way through, oh yeah, that's right, I also do this. Different setup for depending on what I'm doing. I am currently working through Lore, the Tiefling monk. This is a Hero Forge mini from a Seattle critter who won it from Critmas, a thing that we did. I'm part of the Seattle Critter Discord. If you're not familiar with who critters are, it's the name for the fandom that love Critical Role. And if you could see from my perspective looking at my wall, it is a shrine of fan art, and then in the center it was ECC 2019. Basically the entire cast came to Seattle, and I get to look at their gorgeous faces. Anyway, so another fan won a silent auction for me to paint a mini, and shout out to Molly if you're there. Hopefully you're still playing D&D. I know you said you had a session tonight, so hopefully things are going well if you're still playing, ? But last week, let's just get all of the ums out of the way. Last week, I put the base coats on Lore. So that's why Lore looks all fancy and matted. Lore has a violet robe. I went with a little creative license for giving like the purples on the jewelry, cream, other details, did the arrows and such. Whenever I have a Hero Forge mini, the bases are usually a lot thicker than the bases that you get with WizKids. For example, here's this business boy right here too, this Bugbear Warrior. You see how thin that black base is? And because they're so thick, I personally like kind of giving them their own color depending on the palette that's going on with them. And funnily enough, I actually have another Hero Forge mini that I painted for a dwarf character who I based off of Alana from the Tamora Pierce series. Kind of similar thing, has a thick base right there. It's also interesting just seeing how they do their 3D over time. Like, I think their plastic has just gotten a lot better. And what's also interesting to me, if you ever go on Hero Forge and you order a mini, your basic minis are either going to be $20 or $30, and the difference is their premium plastic. Personally, even after I've primed their premium plastic, I haven't, like, maybe I'm too much of an amateur of a painter to really describe the difference, but there's a difference. There's a difference when painting it, and I tend to lean towards the cheaper option, which actually already came primed anyway. And what primer does is just basically a thin layer of paint that allows other paint to stick to it. Otherwise, if you're just painting like this plastic, for example, like the paint wouldn't really stick. So that's what primer does. Anyway, so I always, like, I think I learned that with this mini, actually. I'm still pretty happy with Reagan. That's who I named this one, Reagan Hammerheart. But I learned through this mini that, yeah, you know what, maybe cheaper's the better route anyway, if it's other than quality. It's just better. More bang for your buck, easier to paint, etc., etc., etc. So, that's why I chose like that deep purple, which that purple that I chose on the edge matches the color that I chose for the jewelry. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to get my paintbrushes all picked and chosen. Also choosing the different layering colors that I want to do. Today I'll be working on some dry brushing, I think, to start. I will probably end with wet brushing. I'm gonna... Damn, that's what I meant to do this week. Whenever you wet brush a miniature, you always want it to dry, or else the color doesn't set. And I've talked about this before, so maybe lore will be finished tonight or not. I don't know. We'll find out. There we go. Doop-a-doo. But lore is going to have the easiest of eyes because he has all golden eyes. There's no pupils. And I'll do his eyes last. So I'm just going to bring up my reference photo for what Molly wanted for details, etc. So I have that handy. Oops. I meant to mute that. Sorry, folks. There we go. Light purples and creams. You know, as I'm doing the details, I might just message her on Discord and be like, hey, do you have any more, like, I don't know, describe lore to me in a few adjectives. Aria. Find some good detail brushes. Good evening. The painting goes well. Just trying to figure out my next move here. Mostly because I would like to do some wet brushing, but if I do wet brushing, that will pretty much end my night. Because I have to let the paint dry fully before I can do any more details. So I'm just trying to figure out my plan of attack. How is your evening going? Nice. Hopefully you had a pretty good weekend. Not sure where you're at, but I'm in the Pacific Northwest and we've had a very typical rainy weekend. And obviously with COVID didn't really go out, but got to play a few games this weekend. Ran one, played in one, or actually played in a few. When I think about it. So it was quite a good weekend for me. Love your handle, by the way. I actually practice HEMA, which is historical European martial arts. Not sure if you do too. So I'm very, very much into the sword play, if you will. Nice. Do you have a preference to type of sword? Or are you just like, give me any sword and I'm gonna go at it? I pretty much do longsword. That's what I've trained in. Oh, that's where it went. You know, that is a fair point. I'm giggling because there was a meme that came out a few years ago from a buddy of mine. It was when HEMA was getting like national recognition. It was on CNN Sports or something, a tournament, and one of the interviewers was like, "So you like to play with swords, huh?" And he was, "Yep. They're pretty dangerous, huh?" "Yep." And the next question was like, "Well, what got you into wanting to fool around with swords?" And his answer was, because swords. And then it was like this big goofy grin. It was just super adorable. And also same. And also #mood. Because why not? One of my favorite pastimes. I don't personally own a Sharp, but I have some friends who do. I'm not really into the fireworks, but any excuse that we get, especially big mood, especially during 4th of July, is we'll go out and we'll go to like grocery outlet and we'll buy a bunch of fruit, and specifically pineapple, because pineapple, it's so satisfying to cut through, and we'll essentially do Fruit Ninja in real life. And then it always devolves to a point. We have like stands and podiums and safety protocols and all that. But it usually devolves into somebody is usually off to the side gathering the chunks that we've already chopped up. And then that person will throw said chunks into the air while the other person just like hacks away at it. It's so much fun. And the reason why pineapple is so satisfying is because like the texture is so tight, but it's just so all the phrasing. But when you cut into it, it's just very satisfying, to say the least. Unfortunately, with COVID, haven't really been able to dabble too much into swords because, you know, close contact and all that jazz. Right? Yes, 100%. You just gotta be wary. Usually you clean the swords with gun oil. So we'll usually have like a salad or something off to the side, because you don't want to have your fruit salad with a side of gun oil. Blah. We made that mistake like right off the bat when we first tried it. We're like, oh, we made poor choices. Poor choices. So do you paint minis yourself? Have you dabbled in that kind of art? I'm always curious. And that's quite all right, obviously. Well, now's a great time to dabble into painting, to be honest. Like, I feel like there's been definitely a boom in just like supplies and stuff that's out there to help anyone start. I've only been painting for, gosh, how long have I been playing D&D? I started playing D&D 3 years ago, I think now. And it was like 6 months, less than 6 months. I started getting into it because I DM and I'm all about immersion. So I was like, let's try it. Oh, nice. That's awesome. Oh, dude, that's so lucky. They're all pewter. Dude, that's so old school. That's gotta be really cool. Yeah, those old school minis, they're such a trip. But yeah, like, I mean, I don't know if you watch Critical Role or not, but even Critical Role, like, they just announced this last week that they're doing their own minis from their show. The DM Matt Mercer, he does a lot of homebrew for his stuff, and you know, he's become big enough that Wizards quite regularly promotes and or does business deals with them, and they've gotten published a few times. I want to say, well, no, it was the first book, Wildmount, wasn't published to them. It's published through Ronin, but the second one was. That's super cool though. Anyway, but yeah, like, you just go into your local shop. A lot of the paint supplies is aimed at Warhammer. Ooh, see, I need to get into Adventure Zone. I've heard so many things, but it's just like, I mean, any D&D thing that you're going to get into, you already are investing, you know, to get caught up, hundreds plus hours of content to get caught up on. I got into Critical Role because, why did I get in Critical Role? I think I came across the cast through Geek and Sundry. They had already been going for a while. I still pretty much follow Felicia Day, and then I started playing D&D, and I realized Geek and Sundry had a Critical Role show, or a D&D show, I should say, and started watching them. And I started using Critical Role as a way to learn how to play D&D, not as like the end all be all, but just to like understand mechanics and stuff. Right? See, yeah, like, and then there's also what is it? Roll20 with the redheaded, not Roll20. Oh, what is his name? It's College Humor, that DM, who is also an amazing DM. And if you haven't, seriously, Felicia Day, be still my heart. But if you haven't seen it, there's a Lord of the Rings College Humor kind of one shot. It's like a 4-parter, and that's how I came across that DM. And oh my god, his voices are amazing. They've done like Monster Prom and everything. But my wife is actually really into Adventure Zone, and she'll come back and listen. She doesn't listen to as, she's not like a regular listener, but I think she prefers Adventure Zone over Critical Role. I'm just head over heels into Critical Role and have invested a lot of time into it. But yeah, Felicia Day. That, oof. And I think I want to say, if you've seen the Guild, like her, you know, her flagship program, all of those actors and actresses came together and I think they're currently playing. They started off as like a one shot, like, haha, we're having a reunion. But they're playing D&D together, I think, as the guild characters? I forget. But yeah. Oh, to be the lone one. I know, right? And then I have like I have a sword group that I run a game for, and there's a few Adventure Zone fans over there. So I've actually utilized some of the items that have come from that series. And I actually had one pop up. I think it's called the Ring of Grammarian, where you can switch out a letter and a spell. And my first ever campaign that I was a player in, we were playing Storm King's Thunder, and that item came across, and I didn't have any context for the Adventure Zone. And I am such a fan, even years later, such a fan of that item because of the chaos that it can bring, and just the sheer fun and creativity. But and honestly, oh, yep. When I first started dating my wife, I believe she went and got to go see them in person for some show, and we were doing the whole nerd dance where she'd be like, "What are you up to?" And I'm like, "Oh God, do I tell her I play D&D?" And then I would tell her, and then she'd be like, "Oh my God, I play D&D too." And then there was another night where she did it again, where she's like, "Hey, what are you up to?" And I'm like, "Oh God, do I tell her I'm a big nerd and I'm like playing with real swords?" Blah. And so I told her, and she's like, "Oh my God, I do bow and arrow." Me too. So we're just two major nerds, which is amazing. But I it's so funny. So okay, Adventure Zone. Let's talk about that real quick. If I were to jump in like ground zero, should I go all the way back to the beginning, or is there like, I don't know, part of me wants to, but I feel like, see, big commitment, right? But so if you were, leads me to my question, if you were to suggest where I should start with the Adventure Zone, Balance Arc episode 1 hands down? Okay, so go all the way back. Okay, fair enough. Do you have a favorite character? Because I feel like they're the Adventure Zone. Let's see, their whole thing is they're loosey goosey, if I remember, kind of, with the rules, and they have quicker story arcs, if I remember the premise right. Okay, balance straight up. Oh no. See, but that's like the best feeling. Like, you know a game is good, whether it be like an RPG, tabletop, or what have you, video game, etc., is good when you can like invest in the characters and get emotional about them. I don't know, it's kind of fun. Much better lore. Okay, so this mini that I'm painting, speaking of Critical Role and other fandoms, so I'm part of the Critical Role Seattle Discord, and for Christmas we did a fundraiser where people got to like put forth items or trinkets or jobs or what have you. Jobs meaning like I'll do a thing for you, that they could offer up for people to bid on in a silent auction or put up in a raffle. And one of my things was, hey, I do minis. I love doing it. Like, you know, however much, I think we started at like $20 or something like that. People can start bidding on it. And 100% of the proceeds went to, I don't know if you're familiar with the nonprofit A26LA, but there's an equivalent of one up here in Seattle. That's where I live. And that nonprofit focuses on helping young folk learn how to read, write, communicate well, all the shebang. And we raised like a little over $700. And the winner is a friend of mine, Molly. And this is her original character, Lore. He is a Tiefling monk, a tranquil monk. So he's all about peace, doesn't like violence, is very soft-spoken. And he's this dark gray Tiefling, which, and any mini that you're gonna do, I will tell you from experience and even dealing with Lore right now, gray colors or even anything that's black is really hard to paint. Mostly because like there's no like light doesn't get caught on it, right? So just me and learning how to, I'm not an artist, that's not what I do. I have to learn how colors interact with each other. And I think the biggest thing I've learned in miniature painting is to take my time. Like in the very beginning, I would start with a mini and I would go from beginning to end, all the layers, wet paint, dry brush, which is what I'm doing right now. I did dry brush first, and then wet paint is like I'm actively putting saturated paint on a mini. But the thing is, oh, thanks for the follow, man. Super appreciate that. But the thing is, when you look at the mini and it's still actively drying, it doesn't necessarily mean that's what it will look like when it's done. And then maybe it doesn't turn out to be the color that you want. So I've just learned to take it slow. So last week I did the base colors, and tonight I've just been focusing on dry brushing and now wet brushing. So I'll let it sit for probably another week because I paint minis on Sundays. And then next week I'll do a lot more of like the highlighting details and filling and stuff. So wet brushing, the saturated paint goes in and it covers in the crevices. If you can think of like your knuckles, right? Let's see right here. And what wet brushing will do, the saturated paint will fall like gravity into this crevice and it'll sit there. It'll highlight those. Then dry brushing, you take a brush that hasn't had paint on it, hasn't been in the water, you dip it in the paint, and then you get like 95% of it off, and then you just lightly put it on the surface. And what will happen is the paint will catch the ridges, so the ridges of your knuckles will be highlighted. So then you can get the contrast of within the knuckles and then on top of the knuckles. So if you can see, let's see, I'm not sure if this will translate well. Like his leg right here, you can kind of see there's like light gray that was from the dry brushing. And then on his face, kind of, you can see I didn't put too much, but I did wet brushing, and in his features, like you can see his eyes a little bit more, his eyebrows, that was from the wet brushing. And then, even on his arm, you can see close to this little armband, it's darker because the paint naturally settled right there. So that's what I've been working on tonight. And I believe Molly might be watching, or she's playing D&D. I don't know, but needless to say. So yeah, what are we gonna do next? Let's see. I wanted to do his rope. Let's see. What did I want to do with the rope? I wanted to do it with fur. And so, yeah, like it's so interesting with minis. There's so many different levels of like kind of similar to if you're a regular artist and painting and doing different layers. Like you get frustrated, you're like, oh, it's gonna look worse before it gets better, and that's what's gonna happen probably with his rope, or not his rope, but his oh my god, his rope belt. I'm about to paint over it with this like brown. So the brown is gonna settle in the ridges. It's gonna dry. And then next week I'll come back with this cream color, and I will paint over the ridges so the crevices of the belt will pop, and you'll see what I mean in a second. But all right, so balances, what do you say? Balance arc episode 1. I might actually listen to that tonight when I go to bed. And what's great about wet brushing is that it's like liquid that you can push around with your brush. See, as I'm just kind of moving it, and then you can see also that some of it is beginning to settle in the ridges, which is what I was hoping would naturally happen. Little tiny hair, get out of there. Basically, let's see. Ooh, I have an example of dry brushing actually. So I painted an owlbear on stream a while back, like a month or so back. And owlbears have like the fur of a bear, right? And the feathers. So here's this boy, and you can see all of this texture that you're seeing is from the dry brush. What I did was I did a base color of a brown, and then I went back and I used like a light brown, getting lighter and lighter to bring out the texture. Otherwise, yeah, your eyes, it would just all look kind of like a solid black thing, right? And then the more you do, because you can just do one layer and that's fine, but the more layers of dry brushing, the more chances the little amount of paint is going to catch those ridges, right? And the brighter effect that you will have. So I want to say his back right here is probably like, this is probably like 2 layers of dry brushing. This is probably 1, just enough that a little bit of paint gets caught on it. And then his chest pops a little bit more, and that's about 3 layers. And that's dry brushing. Let's see if I can find another one that's like, yeah, and then here's a bugbear I did right before lore. I'm not sure if the camera will pick it up, but you can see his pants I painted this green color, like a light green color, and you can see how the paint has settled along the ridges there. That's from the wet brushing. And then here's the back of his pants. And this is like a bugbear fighter. And then here is a bugbear sorcerer. And you can see here, here's the cape. Did a little bit more of the wet brushing. Did more paint for added effect and kind of weathering. Did that same effect here on her actual dress. I wanted it to look like, you know, it's these clothes are worn really well. It's her favorite outfit, probably her only outfit, etc., etc. And then towards the end down here, the top layer in this middle is like multiple colors. I used dry brush, so it kind of created these different colors that you see. There's like browns and blues and grays, but even more so because you walk through, you know, when you're walking, what is the thing that's going to catch the most on the ground? It's the bottom of your your pants, whatever you're wearing. And so I wanted to show a little bit more of a fade at the bottom, so I used a very, very light gray, and I dry brushed over that. And there's texture there because on this model, there's like runes or some sort of pattern at the base of her dress. A lot of this is self-taught, but it's self-taught in that I watched a lot of YouTube videos and I learned through trial and error. Like, this is not something that I learned overnight. I mean, it also does help that my wife is an artist. So as far as like color composition, there's been some times where I've gone in and I've been like, hey, you know, what color would go good with this, etc., etc. And she's been able to help me with that. In the case of lore, last week, Molly, the creator of lore, had said, oh, you know, he wears a lot of like light purples, think of violet. And I was like, okay, I do have some purples, but not a lot. So I actually looked up like what makes violet, learned a little history about it, and then I was able to kind of mix and match. So it's all trial and error. And at the end of the day, if you don't like the way something looks, you can paint over it, you can start again. I would say the hardest part to do that with on a mini is the face. Fortunately, Lore doesn't have any pupils, so I get to just draw like little gold, just like a whole gold eye, so I don't have to worry about details with that. But I tend to wait to the end to do face, regardless. Some people do it first, but I don't have the brush dexterity that some people have, so I'm like, nope. Meaning like brush dexterity, meaning like I might be painting and then like my brush might hit something. I try obviously not to. But one thing I did work on tonight with Lore, and we'll see how I feel about it next week, but Molly had said that his horns grow from like a gray color and then it fades into black at the tip. So tonight I was working on I didn't want to have it all be like one gray color fade into black. I tried that last week and it didn't really pop. So I ended up using basically 4 different colors, 4 different grays. There it is. So I started with like the lightest, and my personal favorite paint is Citadel paint. They're probably about $4 or $5 for like one of these little things, but they're great. They're probably mid-level. There is more expensive paint that is out there, but you don't really want to buy the cheapest paint. It's not going to look the best, and you're not going to get bang for your buck. The biggest complaint I knew going into Citadel paint is their lids. I'm surprised they haven't really improved upon them, but at the same time, like, their lids are great and they actually have a function. So one, their lids are great because when you open them, they have a little tray right there, which is great because then you're not constantly dipping your brush into the actual paint, and I just, I'll open it a little bit and it'll naturally rest and I can just go from there. But the drawback of that benefit is the fact that you can almost see, even when I open this up, the paint naturally dries around the edges. So whenever you're done, you really need to make sure there's a good seal on it. Otherwise your paint will dry out. But it's acrylic. It's acrylic paint. So if you ever like buy one of these and you're like, crap, forgot to close the lid, didn't seal it all the way. I've done this past and it's worked just fine. Just take a few drops of clean water, put it into the paint, shake it up, and it'll reactivate the paint. But yeah, so back to the horns. I used these 4, went from light to dark, and then started shading and making sure the colors mesh well. I might do a little bit more of that next week. I'm not sure if it actually shows up on this camera very well. Maybe? And then for funsies, because why not, I used this layer paint that is called Iron Breaker. You use it on armor and it gives it like that metallic effect. So that's what I did with his horns. So when you're actually looking at him, his horns already have a natural shine to it because those little tiny bits of glitter are in that paint, and it's a really, really thin paint. So it didn't change the color. That's what I did. All right. What else shall we do? What else shall we do? Oh, I gotta finish. I wasn't done with his belt. Yes. I would definitely recommend Citadel. I've gotten cheaper paint, like other, let's see what I have. I got like this box set. I want to say it was from Reaper. This came, it's actually in my closet. I don't ever use those colors. But this is what it looks like. If this is not bad, but it's just not good quality. I don't know how to explain it. Citadel paint is thick. Versus this is like really watery down, and the color just isn't there for me. I don't know. But a benefit of this one, when you shake it up, it's got the eyedropper, right? So like whatever you're using, you can just dabble it on there. But just like any arts and craft, if the paint, which you can kind of already see, starts drying in there, you're already kind of screwed. It is very thick, and 3Cs nonetheless, yes. But like that just means less paint on the mini. Like, you don't have to do as many layers, which I really like. And a big reason why I like Citadel paint, or another reason why, with dry brushing, because it's so thick, it's really nice to dry brush with, because when you start wiping it all off, it does still create like a nice spread, versus I've noticed with the thinner paints, when I've tried to dry brush it, it pretty much just slips off the paintbrush, and I have a harder time dry brushing with like thinner paint like this. Last year, before the pandemic, I did invest in a, oh, where did they come from? Oh no! I don't think it was it Ukraine? It was a European. It was an Eastern European group. Poland, a Polish group. Ah, there we go. And I invested in them because for me, skin tone is a thing, and like, honestly, I wanted more diversity in being able to provide different skin tones to the minis that I was doing. And this Kickstarter that I backed did that. So they came in different sets. They had like a red, a green, a blue, so they had all different shades. The package that I backed, I got to choose two different ones. So I chose red, so I got a bunch of really cool reds. And then I got the skin tone set, which, let's see if I can bring some of these out. I haven't used them too often, so I can't really recommend it one way or the other, but just this is just like an example of a different kind of paint canister. And this paint canister is more common, I think. So kind of similar to the Citadel, you open it up and you still, like, they still do like the little mini tray right there. It's a little better for sealing purposes. And this is 18 milliliters versus Citadel is 12 milliliters. So you get a little bit more bang for your buck here. Another thing that Citadel does that I have yet to see other companies do is wet paint, which is what I'm painting with right now. So they are these larger tubs that they're already saturated down, because, not saying you can't do that on your own, you just have to mix it yourself, and it can be hit or miss. For me, like, the consistency is harder if you're not good with mixing paint. So I actually have quite a few. Here's like a dark purple, and here's like a fun lime green algae looking color, and I have a white, I have a yellow, I have a red. They also came out with their own like thick blood, so if you want to be gnarly with your stuff, you can do that. Essentially, Citadel is consistent. The price is fair. The paint is amazing. I would say it's like a 4.5 out of 5. I haven't really found anything close to even a 4. And they also have, it's very, very clear what the paint is supposed to be utilized for. You can still utilize it for other things, not necessarily what it tells you it's supposed to be utilized for, but it's nice that they have like a whole line. And what do I mean by what it's supposed to be utilized for? Well, you're supposed to do your base paint, and then from there, layers and details. So base paint is usually a little bit thicker than the other paint, and it will actually say that on the paint canister. So like, here's the black one, it says base, and then let's see, this cream bone one is layer. So in theory, they're telling you, hey, you use the equivalent of the base for whatever, but I've definitely used a layer for a base and vice versa. So to me, it doesn't matter. But I mean, they try to make it easy. And then this one, they call their wet paint contrast paint because that's what they're doing. And then they also have fun stuff like dry. They actually came out with their own dry, so you're not wasting as much. Here, I'll show you what it actually looks like. Let's see if the camera will pick it up. Can you see it? Yeah, there we go. So it's like this actual, it's really thick, and you can see I've stabbed it because it's like this weird, it almost looks like makeup, like a palette, right? But like if I get that on a brush and then I rub over, I don't know, it helps you save paint because you can waste paint with dry paint. So, but that's really the only dry color I have. It's pandemic. But I typically go out to a local game board shop that has D&D stuff, and I try to support them there. I haven't found Citadel paint consistently on Amazon. And then on top of that, they sell their own brushes. And something that I utilize pretty much every time, except for I'm not going to utilize it anymore for Hero Forge minis, which I'll get to in a second, is they have these handles that you can attach your mini into that makes painting them so much easier. And here's one. So I'll get an example of Mr. Bugbear, and this is retractable. So I just set Mr. Bugbear there, and I retract it, and he sits right in there. And then you have this awesome, like, handy dandy. You don't have to use putty. You don't have to use anything for that. And then they have a bigger one for the bigger boas. So I can easily put Mr. Owlbear there. I still have a handle. I want to say these are like 15 or 16 bucks. These are for sale on Amazon. And this goes pretty darn far. So this could hold a gargantuan. It's a big boy. And the reason why I don't use these on the Hero Forge minis, I wonder if it'll show up with this one, is because it's plastic, right? It's a finer, it's a thinner, it's a more brittle plastic. Whereas these WizKids ones, these are like a harder plastic. They don't bend as much. And those are springs that are retracting and putting pressure on the base. What I found with the Hero Forge ones, I think you can kind of tell that it's warped. I did it with this one. That's a good angle. You can kind of see it's like that a little bit because the base, the holder was putting pressure on it. So that's why I'm utilizing one of these. And I have a little bit of putty under him. So, but you can really use anything in your house. You can use, I've seen people use like medicine bottles, dice, like the actual holders. You can utilize one of these. Just get a piece of tape. You don't have to go all fancy. And Citadel, the Citadel product. So, I mean, again, Citadel coming through. Alright, I'm going to continue. But yeah, Citadel, if they ever sponsor anything, I would definitely be interested, but I'm not looking to make money on this channel at all. If anything, any money that I earn from this channel is actually going to be donated. Maybe one day when I reach affiliate status, we start getting subs going. That's what I want to do. Is like whatever revenue I get, my followers and subscribers will get to choose monthly where does that revenue get to go to. So okay, dice crafting, It's so funny. I'm definitely more apprehensive into dice crafting. I think mostly because the fumes, I don't really have a setup. You kind of have to have, like, you have to have a good setup. You have to have all the different components. It's very, I mean, I don't know where you live, but like I live in the Northwest and it's always rainy, especially right now. I don't have a garage. If you have a garage, like that's a really good setup. I live in an apartment. I would love to like just dabble in dice making, dice crafting. It seems like a lot of fun. I think before I would do that, I would do honestly 3D printing, but that's kind of the same thing. The biggest deal with that, one, it's expensive. Two, where would I put a printer? Three, there are fumes that come with that printer. But there are some pretty cool things that people are doing with dice right now. I backed a liquid core Kickstarter right before the pandemic happened. And we just got an update today that I'm very excited about. They basically had to change the look of the dice because in their prototypes it looked like to everyone that the liquid core was you couldn't really tell there was a line, and then when they came out with the pictures of the prototypes, it looked like a little bead inside of the dice, and it just didn't look like what they had been advertising. So they did a bunch of adjusting and testing, and then today's announcement was like, hey, we fixed the thing so it looks a lot better. Cool. Not sure if the camera will pick this up. It's getting there. We getting there. I'm gonna go ahead and brush the wood. Oh, also, if I haven't said so before, there's no right or wrong way to paint a mini as far as like, ooh, what should I do first, wet brushing or dry brushing? I personally like to dry brush before I wet brush, and the reason being is because similar to like if you've ever decorated eggs for Easter with crayons before you dunk them in tie-dye, there's already like some sort of surfacey texture on minis. So when you dry brush them, that texture gets brought out. And then when you wet brush them, if you've done the dry brush and there was no like really super defined ridges, you're still gonna get like this really cool effect that the wet brushing will bring out because of the natural texture that's on the mini. So it's a lot of fun. And I'll see if I can show you that with the monk, with Lore's staff, because I dry brush his staff. Yeah, I don't mind. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you, but what's the, let's see, wait, oh, thank you. Yeah, man, I just, I'm okay. Like, there are way more people in the world that need help more than I do. And there's a lot of really great nonprofits out there. So I thought, I'm a big nerd. I do want to kind of get into social media or what have you, and I like meeting new people, and over the years I've gotten to know some really cool like tabletop folks, even especially during COVID, and a lot of people were like, hey, you should paint, and I knew I dabbled in YouTube a while back, But I was in the middle of grad school, so like that didn't last long. But speaking of swords, once a year we do a tournament called Sword Squatch, and I'm one of the leaders on that. And I ran a one shot, and so we were trying to figure out with COVID how to do that, because that's like what we would do every year, because we try to keep things weird. But how do you do a D&D one shot in COVID times? Well, I was like, shit, well, let's produce a show. So I basically produced this whole thing. It's on Twitch, I think. Probably not anymore, because now I know how Twitch works. Because videos expire after a certain amount of time. Maybe I should rerun it. Anyway, basically, I shot the whole thing. I edited it. We didn't actually stream it live. What I ended up streaming was the file itself, because I didn't know how to Twitch. But I really enjoyed it. Like, I cut it. I went on Twitch live, and then I got to talk with a lot of really cool folks while it was going live, and that was a lot of fun. And so I was like, you know what, this is actually a lot better than YouTube, because I don't have to worry about editing, and if I do, there's Fiverr, which I'm dabbling in. Anyway, I'm going on a major tangent, but that's how I found myself doing Twitch. And here I am, just trying to be consistent and wanting to share love and hopefully bring a community together, or meet other people and become part of those communities to just continue, because life and things, and we just need more good things in this world, so I appreciate that. Oh, also, thanks for the follow on Twitter. Yeah, totally. So your game is on Fridays, okay. No, feel free to shout me out. I would super appreciate that. Let's see, technically. Yeah, totally. What is the name of your group that you stream with? Is it actually like D&D 5e, or do you guys do other stuff like the Adventure Zone, etc.? And you kind of like bounce around to different things. So I can look you up as well. Oh, cool. Okay, all right. So you are watching. Okay, awesome. I will write that down right now. That's a great name, too, BT Dubs. Make sure that camera. All homebrew. Ooh. Okay. So, are you the DM? Or are you a player? Oh. Gotta shake it. Ooh, Gridsgelder. Okay. I'm gonna write that so I remember. Nice. Dwarven Vengeance Paladin. Ooh. I love me some dwarves. This mini that I showed you earlier, this is Regan Hammerheart. She's based off of, not sure if you're familiar with the author Tamora Pierce, but I'm a big fan. She writes a lot of, or she still writes, like strong female characters in her little fantasy world. And her first one was Alana the Lioness. And that's like my translation of her character, because I was rereading it at the time. I usually reread the series like once a year. And hell yeah. I actually have, I'm currently running one of my campaigns is an all bard campaign where I'm DMing it, and it takes place in the Sword Coast, and it's essentially a tour where the party that I'm running, they are on tour throughout the Sword Coast as they are initiates into this bard guild, and they started out in Silvery Moon, and then they're going to Mithril Hall, Bryn Shander, Luskin, Neverwinter, and they're going to end in Waterdeep with a finale. And the premise was, it was either going to be a one-shot, and then I was like, oh, but it would really be cool if you could do a tour, and all the guys wanted to do a tour, so that's what we've been doing. And it's more episodic, so it's like after every town that they leave, they level up. So they started at level 7, and they're in Mithril Hall right now, which I don't know if you've dealt with Mithril Hall at all, but it's essentially Moria from Lord of the Rings. It's this massive dwarven city inside of this mountain. Oh, and it's just bards. They're one of my favorite class in D&D because they're just chaos. They're just chaos. And as a DM, you never know how to deal with them. Like, and I get excited about that. And this whole campaign already, like the first episode, I'm not, this is a whole nother tangent, but basically in Mithril Hall, long story short, one of them like rolled a history check, and I had there's an actual Mithril Hall song. So I was like, oh, you know this shanty. And they essentially got the entire city, because it's in this massive cavern, to sing along, and they did a parade, and one of the bards knows Fly, and his best friend is this Grog type, like Grog from Critical Role. It's a Goliath, and he used him like a balloon at the front of the parade, and it became like this round robin song. And that is just like one example. Oh, another example is they convinced the king, because they're there for a stag party. That's like their task, is the crowned prince is getting married, and they're to be the entertainment for the stag party. So they met the king, but the prince was away. So the king was like, entertain me for a bit. And they were like, okay, should we do a play? So my players in between games basically designed this whole play, and then when we started, I had to improv as the king as they're going through the play, and that was our last session. And oh, it was so good. Oh, it actually ended up, there is a item called Bag of Tricks, that you can use an action to like roll a d8 and you summon a random animal that's friendly. It's like a fey creature essentially. And this entire time during this play, a lot of illusions are going on. And then at one point, one of my characters summons this creature, and the story was the king is this bad pirate, and he wanted the bad guy to win for once. So he had captured a damsel in distress, and that the party was there to try and fight the king, but he was going to end up winning anyway. Well, the bard used the Bag of Tricks, summoned, I believe it was, what was it? It was a wolf. And the king, thinking all these illusions were happening, just sliced the wolf in half, like rolled enough, and just sliced him in half. And then there was blood everywhere. And then the bard went crazy because he's never seen one of his buddies die like that. He doesn't know out of game that, once they hit 0, it just reverts back to the bag. But like, it's totally random the next one that he pulls out. So it turned into, all of a sudden they were fighting the actual king, but the king was thinking it was real. And then eventually the king got like, I think it was a lightning bolt, and took actual damage. Oh, fucking bards. Everything turned out okay. But the bard that did all that, like, got a lesson of humility because he didn't keep his temper. Also, like, warn the king. I don't know, like, you're good, but I know bards. Anyway, that was a long tangent. Hi, Willow. I have a little cat tower right here. So, some of my cats come and hang out. Eventually, that whole tangent literally could just be #bards. So, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Eventually I will get a cat cam so people who are watching can see like this whole the cuteness. All right, so I'm gonna finish off with this with Lore's staff. I just want to show you real quick. You can kind of see, I think, let's see, it's a thin, there we go. So I base paint like a light brown onto the staff, and then I did like a lighter brown dry brush and then a light gray dry brush, and that's what you're kind of seeing with that. Now I'm going to use this wet brush to go over it and hopefully do some of that texture work that I talked about. There's no crevices. Well, actually, there's a few crevices that this could fall into. So hopefully you'll start seeing that like Easter effect. Maybe that's what I should call it, like an Easter effect that I was describing earlier. And anytime you get too much ink on your brush, what's great about dry brushing, you just, like what I'm doing, if you can kind of see here, I'm taking my brush after I've dabbed it, going back on the mini and soaking it up like a sponge, and then repeat. Okay, there's one side. I think when you first popped in, that's what I was doing with his face. I was using a black wet brush, and I got some of the ink. A lot of the ink went into his eye socket, which I don't want it to dry like that because it won't highlight the eye socket. It will actually just fill the eye socket with paint, and that won't look good when I need to go back and put the gold in for his eye. Exactly, and that just basically ruins what the effect that you're going for. Also, what's great about wet brushing, it helps take the pressure off. Like whenever you're doing the base coat, you don't necessarily have to worry about getting every nook and cranny, because when you come in, ugh, this music, no, go away. We are not in the club. Basically, yeah. But wet brushing also helps you with, like, when you're doing the base coat, it fills in what you miss with just color, so you don't like have to do it fully. Like, you just don't have to worry about being 100% completionist, I guess is what I'm trying to say, for your base coat, if you plan on wet brushing. See if the camera will kind of pick it up. I'm not sure. It's definitely darker, but that's just because of the wet paint. But I'm not sure if you're able to see the texture. But you can see the wet paint settled in this crevice right here, in that crevice right there. So when I come back, when everything is dry, I'll take a lighter brown and I'll do some highlights, and it'll show a little bit more wear and tear, and it'll also make the actual staff pop. And that way your eye won't just see this stick of brown. Looking pretty good there, Lore. Which, speaking of, I might do that on his hands too. pretty good about lore. You know, it's crazy. Oh, I'm not gonna. Yep, there we go. It's been interesting. Fortunately, we live in an area that people actually listened to the CDC guidelines. So I unfortunately, I won't be speaking about my job on here. That's just something I'm going to keep private. But long story short, like I pretty much returned to work a lot sooner than a lot of other folk. And when I did, or I was still going like once a week because I had at some point had to be in the office. But I worked downtown Seattle, and it was like a graveyard. No one was around, and it was weird because the buses were still running. Like that was like a really surreal thing to see. And then being on the freeway, you know, where a commute would take an hour takes like the actual time it takes to drive to the office, which is like 10 minutes because I still live in Seattle. So like that's a weird thing. I would say now it's like the traffic is not anywhere near it was. I think a lot of folk are, and a lot of companies are discovering that most people can work from home, which is awesome. But I'm fortunate enough that I haven't lost anyone close. But that doesn't mean I haven't had anyone affected from COVID. I've had a lot of friends who were. I've had people in the office who were. But knock on wood, I have yet to experience anyone who's passed away. And overall, it's been nice to live in a bubble that follows the guidelines. I think the most frustrating thing is like interacting with people who don't believe in it or don't respect your own boundaries on how to function within COVID, meaning like they don't wear a mask or they come within your bubble. It's been hard because like I haven't seen my family. I'm from Washington, and my family, they live north of here, and they're fortunate enough. I only have a sister, and she's married, has 2 kids, and both my parents are still alive, and they live on like the same property. It's like 13 acres, 2 different houses, so they've been within each other's bubbles. But God, it's January now. Like I went and saw my niece for her birthday, and that was really uncomfortable because my family told me that it was going to be a small party and it wasn't. So that was really uncomfortable. But before, and that was in August, before that, I hadn't seen them since January, and now it's January again. So it's really hard. It's a weird time, dude. Yeah, right? And it's really hard because, well, my sister's a nurse. Thankfully, she got the vaccine. And I've had a few friends who are in certain situations where they've gotten the vaccine. And I actually, because of my job, I got the vaccine as well, for the first dose. So I'm getting the second dose in a little under a month. That put me out for a couple of days. I got really exhausted. I didn't get any like really, really bad symptoms other than exhaustion, but it's hard. Like, I don't know. I miss my family, but it's complicated because they're super conservative. This is a deep dive, but yeah. My brother-in-law believing in QAnon, believing in the rioters, all that kind of stuff. It's been difficult, but oh man, family. Oh, that's great. You've gotten to work from home. Yeah, safety and stupid. I totally agree. No, that's super awesome. And another kind of benefit that's come out. So my wife worked in a cafe pre-COVID, and then I got let go from said cafe when COVID happened. And she's an artist, as I mentioned earlier, and it kind of forced her into a position to where she finally got the time to focus on her art. So she's been doing awesome and kicking ass, and she's actually working on this comic that is based on a character that actually is in the same campaign as Reagan, the dwarf I showed you earlier, named Dottie, and she's having fun diving into the world of fairies and fae creatures. She's told me since that she's like started storyboarding and everything that it's not like canon in the D&D world, but it's like I think a modern day fairy type tale, kind of midsummery. And she's gonna do the whole webtoon thing. She's got people reading her scripts. I'm just super proud of her. She's working really hard. Even tonight she was working on character art and stuff and showing friends, you know, this is what these fae creatures will look like. Oberon, I think specifically. So like blessing in disguise. And then I got married to my wife during COVID. We were engaged previous, and then with her losing her job, she lost her insurance. You know, it's just COVID time. So we had a big discussion because we were already kind of thinking about wedding stuff in the future, but we had a Zoom wedding. We're gonna have an actual wedding, but we had Zoom vows at least, so she can get insurance. So she has insurance now. But I'm excited to navigate the future of post-COVID. It's definitely, I mean, I'm sure you've probably heard from your friends in your circle. It's like pre-COVID is already kind of like similar to 9/11, a world into itself. We don't even know what our new normal is going to be. So that'll be interesting to navigate. But one thing I can say is thank goodness for tabletop RPGs. Thank goodness. I didn't utilize Roll20 at all previous to COVID, and now I think I'm on the verge of 3,000 hours. Let me look this up. I started an account in 2017. I forget why. Oh, I just hit 2,000. So since COVID, I had 0 hours played. COVID happened. Almost a year later, I have logged I have logged over 2,021 hours. Like close to 10 of which was this weekend. But yeah, tabletop RPGs, man. Like, they've been such a great escape. So, I mean, look at us here talking on the internet. Me painting little tiny plastic figurines. The one I didn't show you though. This is probably one of my favorite ones that I've done. I have my favorite ones kind of sitting on my desk. This little beholder. Painting them in a different coloring than normal. Let's see if the camera will pick this up. So, you see the little white marks? On his scale type things right there, that's the texture effect that I was bringing out with lore. So I did a dry brush, and then I did a wet brush over it, and it was able to bring that out. So that was a lot of fun. But looking at the clock, oh my goodness, it is already 11. I am going to let lore dry. Dry brush, yeah. So dry brush is when you take a brush that has never been dunked into water. You haven't used it for your session. Typically you want something that is long and flat. You don't want like a small thing. So like these are really good dry brushes. I need to wash them. This has a little bit of a thicker to it, or it's just thicker. And what you do is you dip it in the paint. You wipe like 90% of it off, and then you lightly get the ridges. So the thing that I was talking about earlier, where the wet brush, the paint would settle here, the dry brush, the paint would hit the tops of my knuckles. And when I showed you the owlbear, that was a dry brush. So but you also need to remember to wash your brushes pretty much right away. So I say that, but I'm bad at it. I need to do it tonight. Because it'll extend the life of your brush way more. if you remember. So, but I think that is it for me. I say a few things before I log off for the night, so people remember these things, or I hope they do. But well, one, I will be back on Tuesday. I've been playing through the BioShock series. I'm currently on the second one, and I believe Tuesday is going to be the finale of the BioShock series that I've been playing through. My wife is very excited for me to get to Infinite. But I don't think I start at 7:30 PST. I will be very surprised if the finale takes the entire session. I usually do it from like 7:30 to 10:30. But if I end early, I'll probably pop into like Destiny, or I've been playing that on my off time, or Stardew Valley because it's relaxing. But the few things that I do like to say is please remember that you are worthy of self-love. You are worthy of love, and do something nice for yourself this week or another person. Just spread the love. All right. I will definitely look into the Hired Swords. I'm very excited. Thank you for joining me tonight. It was a lovely chatting with you. I hope you have a lovely week, and I hope Krig's, I'm gonna slaughter this, Krig's Galder, blah. Your dwarf paladin has many adventures that are lovely, and survives, hopefully. But I will definitely check out your podcast. So have a lovely night. Thank you for joining me. If anyone else is out there, hope you have a lovely night too, and see you guys next time. Bye.